Convicts are funny people if you think about their lives. They have no problem committing some of the most horrible crimes, but as soon as they are caught and sentenced to prison, they break down and ask for mercy like it wasn't even their fault. It's probably the first time they get a taste of reality. From sweating to rolling on the floor, today we will show you the top 10 convicts who freaked after being given a life sentence. Let's dive right in. Number 10. Kyandrea Cook. Let's start this video with a story with an emotional tug from the very start. In 2017, then 18-year-old Kyandrea Cook was sentenced to a 20-year prison term over carjacking. What happened was, Cook set up a fake dating account to set up a very detailed robbery which didn't go quite as planned and resulted in another teen getting shot. The teen was taken to a hospital and Cook was arrested and brought in front of a judge who gave her a 20-year sentence for the trouble she caused. When the verdict was handed down, the convict's mother dropped on the floor, crying and rolling like there was no tomorrow. Looking at her mother, Cook also started crying and begging for forgiveness. Within minutes, after a link to the story about Kyandrea Cook's sentencing was posted on the internet, the views, reactions, and comments began rolling in. The breakdown was the most famous thing on the internet that day. Number 9. Brandon Spencer. Next up, we have Brandon Spencer, who was sentenced to 40 years in prison when he was 21. Back in 2012, Brandon shot up a Halloween party on the University of Southern California campus, injuring 4 people. Before the sentence was announced, Spencer's attorney pleaded with the judge for a lenient sentence. He said Brandon had made some poor choices in life, but was on his way to fix himself. However, prosecutors portrayed Spencer as a criminal with gang ties and used tweets that had been sent from his phone as evidence. He was portrayed as a documented, well-known gang member in front of the juror and had been shot before. The judge bought the story and sentenced him to 40 years in prison. While the judge was giving the final verdict on the case, Brandon pounded his forehead twice on the desk in court. He was convicted on 4 counts of attempted murder. The whole sheriff's deputies gathered around Spencer as he sobbed following another emotional court appearance. Number 8. Erika Butts and Shanita Cunningham. This is the most dramatic reaction to a prison sentence you will see today. Erika Mae Butts and Shanita Latrice Cunningham were involved in the death of a 3-year-old Serenity who was staying with them. Butts admitted to police that she whipped the little girl with a belt for urinating on the floor. Not only that, but Serenity had also fallen on the floor multiple times. When the child couldn't breathe after weeks of torture, they called 911, but the poor Serenity had already died before reaching the hospital. While listening to the final verdict, both Butts and Cunningham collapsed in the courtroom upon learning that they would spend the rest of their lives in prison. Court officials had to carry out both women as they collapsed on the floor. Just look at her reaction. The verdict was clear though, as the judge said he was almost brought to tears after looking at the little girl's battered body. Number 7. Jaleel Hoskins. Up till now, you have seen convicts crying, headbanging, and even collapsing to the floor. Up next, we have Jaleel Hoskins, who did something not many dare to even think about. Hoskins had been found guilty of strangling and killing his then 26-year-old girlfriend and dumping her body in a dumpster. He was sentenced to 50 to 100 years in prison. After hearing the verdict, Hoskins hurled the table in the judge's direction and screamed at the victim's family in a fit of rage. He had to be forcibly removed from the room by court deputies. We think when you kill someone, you get the guts to throw a table towards a judge. Still, that's pretty ballsy. Number 6. Jackson. You might be thinking, things cannot get weirder than a convict throwing a table towards a judge. After all, it's the damn judge who controls your life. However, this video will show you that there's always room for more drama in a courtroom. 19-year-old Jackson was convicted of the first-degree murder of Nathan Potter, a 21-year-old university student. Jackson was trying to rob him, and when things went sideways, he killed Nathan. Jackson expected to get parole in his life sentence at least, but he lost it when he was denied that. Just look at his reaction to the final verdict. It's just insane. Number 5, Juan Rodriguez. You can hurl a table at a judge, you can take down deputies, but one thing you do not do is threaten a judge. But that's exactly what this guy did. Juan Rodriguez stabbed a nurse in a mental health facility and was standing before a judge when he aggressively demanded to be released from jail. His reason? On the ground that he was Jewish and wanted to celebrate the Jewish New Year. His Tony Montana impression did not help one bit. The judge continued to ignore his request, and his subsequent statements left the courtroom in a shock. Too bad the judge had Juan's life in her hands and didn't flinch even a bit at the threats and sent him to prison. This is something you definitely need to avoid when standing in front of a judge. Would you ever threaten a judge? Number 4, knocked down by officers. Up next, we have a convict who not only went into a rage when hearing his prison sentence, but also attacked several officers who were present in the court. The video starts calmly with someone crying in the back as the final verdict is read by the judge. Suddenly, the camera moves to the convict who takes down an officer in rage. The other dozen deputies present in the room knocked the convict down and then calmed him. Just look at his outburst. That's the reaction of a man who knows he won't survive in jail. Next time you want to avoid prison, just don't commit crimes. If you think that this was the most dramatic breakdown you've seen in a courtroom, then you will be surprised at the reaction of the guy at number 1, so stay tuned for that. Number 3, Andrew Worth. Andrew Worth was a suspect in killing 2 people outside the downtown Jefferson bar and was brought in front of a judge who had Andrew's fate in his hand. Worth was part of a biker gang who had nothing to lose tattooed on his chest. Unfortunately, he did have a lot to lose. Worth was charged with 2 counts of first-degree deaths of Lewick and her friend, Greg Peters. Both lived in Jefferson County. The judge set the bail at $1 million, and to which Andrew quickly stood up and said the charges were ridiculous. He then began to fight with bailiffs, who ultimately tackled Worth and dragged him into a holding area out of the courtroom. Number 2, Michael Marin. By now, you must be thinking you have seen everything there is to see when it comes to courtroom drama, but believe us, you haven't. Up next, we have the tragic case of Michael Marin. Marin was an outdoor enthusiast and a trader who was on top of the world in May 2009. Literally, he was standing on top of Mount Everest, a feat only a handful of people have achieved. And just 2 months later, he was in jail in Phoenix. His Biltmore Estates mansion had been gutted by fire, and Marin faced an arson charge that could lead to decades in prison. Marin was sitting at the defendant's table when the verdict was returned. It stated that Marin had to face 7 to 21 years in prison on the arson conviction. Marin, who had seen every beautiful thing in this world, just couldn't bear spending time in jail. He ended up committing suicide by eating cyanide in the courtroom. Yes, you heard that right. He was caught on video swallowing something that had been hidden in his fingers. He collapsed after 7 minutes, and everyone just watched the whole thing in complete shock. Number 1, Marcel Anguiano. Finally, we have the story of a convict that is so unbelievable you will think it's not true. Marcel Anguiano had been to prison 5 times before turning 45. In 2010, he was again arrested for cutting his niece with a butcher knife. The kid survived, but it was still a very gruesome crime. Marcel pleaded guilty to aggravated assault and was expecting the judge to put him on probation. He got the shock of a lifetime when the judge, influenced by Marcel's 5 previous stints, sentenced him to 40 years in prison. Anguiano immediately pulled out a razor blade in confusion and rage and put it to his throat hard. Blood started pouring out of his throat, and he collapsed on the courtroom floor. After a few minutes, he was pronounced dead. It's still the most horrible incident that has happened in a courtroom. That's it for today, folks. We hope you enjoyed the video. Which one of these stories did you find the most fascinating? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.